Hello and welcome to the Homespun History Podcast with me, Anne Harper.
And me, Dr. Gavin Hughes.
Join us as we attempt to weave history and music together to tell the stories of the people, the places, and the landscapes that we love. So hello everybody and welcome to a special bonus episode of the Homespun History Podcast. Gavin, it's good to see you.
It's good to see you too, Anne.
We're kind of doing a recap of this episode. We recorded our live. This is not live. This is done in the house, so this isn't out in the field like normal. And we're kind of going back in time with our minds, thinking back to a trip we made last week out to County Fermanagh when we saw the Boa Island statues.
That's right. And whilst we were there, you said to me, "Oh, there's this particular site. Can we squeeze it in and shall we have a wee look at it?" And I was like, well, why not? And actually, this bonus episode is a result of that particular kind of like diversion, rabbit hole, call it what you will. We did go down a kind of huge rabbit hole, and we went to a place called Cooneen
Ghost House.
Cooneen Ghost House. The hint, ladies and gentlemen, is in the title.
Yes, the title gives it away. But the Cooneen Ghost House, I had wanted to go for ages, and I had first gone, I think 2 or 3 years ago. The only other time I've been with my husband and the kids were in the car and we just went for a quick poke about because I knew a little bit about the story, but you hadn't.
I've never heard about it. Never heard about the story at all.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's something. The paranormal is something that I'm quite interested in, but I would consider myself to be a bit of a healthy skeptic. I'd never heard of this story, and I didn't realise, and we'll discuss this now, how famous a story and how famous a paranormal site this place actually is.
I know, it's amazing. Obviously Ireland has an international reputation when it comes to sort of spooks and fairies and all that kind of stuff. But this story, travelled the Atlantic. It's known worldwide. There's been documentaries made about it. There's been loads of people have investigated it, as a paranormal investigation. But that's not why we went. We literally just went to have a look. On
the off chance, just so that we could find it. Or as you said, you've been close by.
Yeah.
And what really intrigued me was from the historical academic point of view, if you like, is actually how well documented this site and actually how well documented this case is.
Yeah, there are stacks of primary sources associated with this site. Do you like how I did that? That was GCSE history there.
That was very
sources.
well done.
But loads of reports in the newspapers. It was visited by the local MP. There were priests, coming in and out of the house. All the neighbours were coming in and out of the house. So this isn't just sort of a hearsay. This is a lot of primary sources.
A lot of people were experiencing something on this site and certainly believed that there was something there.
Yeah,
and that is quite intriguing.
And so just for our listener, singular,
yes.
Just to say that when we went into the house together, so Gavin didn't really know a whole lot about the story. I think I'd mentioned maybe the name of the family, and we'll hear the story in a moment. But other than that, you really didn't have much to kind of to prejudice you.
No, I didn't really have any kind of baggage on this at all, because I hadn't known about the site, didn't know about the history of the site, apart from you mentioned it as we were going in about the family. And really, when it comes down to it, I was looking at it from a completely different perspective, than
just with a blank page, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, my page wasn't entirely blank. But now, so in the meantime, since we've come back, and we'll play you the recording that we made while we were there in a few minutes, but since we've come back, we've done a little bit more research and sort of freshened our minds on the rest of the story. At least I've freshened my mind, and you've read a bit in the meantime. Yes. But we're going to start off by just telling you the story of the Cooneen Ghost. So this is an article that was published in the Ulster Newsletter in 1988, written by Nuala McCann, and we're just going to read a little bit out of that article. Gavin, would you like to take it away?
Yes, I will. It says the true history of the Cooneen Ghost dates back to 1913, when locals say an old pensioner was murdered when he went to collect the rent. They also say a man hanged himself in one of the rooms.
The story goes that one morning a man was waiting by the fire in the house when he saw a ghost. It came down by the trapdoor like a ball of wool in a black bag and coasted around the floor.
It's said that one family bought the house, stayed in it one night, but kept quiet and sold it 6 months later. A canny businessman sold it to a new family who had hardly a night's peace.
As the two daughters lay by the fire to sleep one night, they felt a movement like snakes in their beds. Suddenly, their pillows were torn from underneath their heads.
As the petrified girls lay on, there was a sound like a kicking horse, and the bedclothes were thrown across the room. The girls were shunned when they went to crochet class, and when they sought the parish priest, the ghost apparently got down his back.
Although the ghost was seemingly a Protestant one, it would whistle and answer questions in Irish and Latin.
When holy water was sprinkled in the house, as it often was, it showed its loyal hostility by playing back the tune of the Boyne Water.
As the water was being sprinkled, the ghost would flee along the wall of the house, knocking louder and louder as it went. A priest who investigated the being on 50 occasions said that it spat at him and lapped like a dog. The family eventually emigrated to America, and they were never troubled again.
3 priests were not so lucky. It is said that one had a nervous breakdown, another spinal meningitis, and the third facial paralysis.
And that's just a very brief version of the story
It is.
from the newsletter. So that was covered in 1988. Now that we know a little bit of the story, let's talk about that poor unfortunate family who bought the house. That was the Murphy family, and all under their mother, Bridget Murphy, because very sadly her husband had died. One of the things that article doesn't reference is the fact that her husband had died, and a lot of people thought that the noises might be related to that death. He fell apparently off a cart and a horse and sort of cracked his head, and that was him. So they bought this house, or moved into this house, rented this house in desperation. I'm fairly sure, because I've had a look.
Yes, and the census records in 1901 we find Michael Murphy and Bridget Murphy. And possibly in a different house, that very, as you said earlier. By 1911, it is just Bridget Murphy as the head of the family. And this all happens in 1913.
And she has how many children living in the house?
Well, her eldest is 21.
That's
3,
James.
4, 5, 6, 7 children.
7 children listed on the census.
Yes, in 1911.
Yeah.
You know,
so she was left
the youngest
with no
is 3.
breadwinner.
Yeah.
Her eldest son, presumably, and her, maybe they worked the farm together, did whatever work they could. But I can only imagine they weren't well off.
Well, I was going to say, you can imagine from the site of the Cooneen farmhouse where it is, the land around is not particularly good. They must have been very hard scraping a living off that land.
Yeah, they must have worked hard.
They must have worked very hard.
And in really tragic circumstances. And tragically for them as well, the previous family had stayed one night in the house.
Yeah.
And then they'd vamoosed.
Yes.
They left. What happened to them that night?
As you said, the chances are that Bridget found this house, was able to afford this house with the rent because of the associations, maybe.
But maybe she didn't know.
Maybe she didn't know.
Maybe nobody
maybe
told
she
her,
was, to use that great Ulster word, maybe she was gulled.
Actually, when I was younger, the same sort of thing happened to our family, that we actually only found out after my parents had bought a small bungalow that the previous occupant had killed himself.
Yes.
So these things do happen. You think you've got a bargain, and then all of a sudden you find out that
that's not
maybe
at all
a bit
what
off
you've
more than
got.
and I have to say that house we think was haunted. We didn't stay in it very long either, so I really feel for Bridget as well. But some of the visitors that came along to witness these hauntings were, we had the parish priests who came. There were many neighbours who came by the house.
Father Coyle, who was actually from the nearby Cooneen
church,
parish church. And it's to have it documented, and to say this goes back, we can actually look at the newspaper reports and the documents going back to 1913, which is very unusual.
They were really there.
They were. This all happened.
Yeah.
Now the other question is, are they having some kind of hallucination? Are they kind of like what's going on in the house?
Well, if it was a hallucination, it wasn't just the family who were hallucinating, was it?
No.
I have here a copy of Shane Leslie's ghost book.
Well, a very famous ghost book.
Very famous ghost book, and he, of course, a very important figure of the time. He would have been a very well-to-do figure of the time. You were telling me his family had Castle Leslie.
Yes, in County Monaghan.
Famous Anglo-Irish
Irish family, yes. And
Shane actually converted to Catholicism, and I think maybe that's something to do with his interest now in the paranormal and maybe the reason that he wrote this ghost book. But it's interesting because he describes this, and a lot of his descriptions are based on, as he says, first-hand documents. So he really documented this properly.
That's right, because he went on, he interviewed the parish priests, and that's fantastic first-hand accounts.
Well, he took these first-hand accounts and he's actually written it up as a case in his ghost book. So these are all, case studies, I suppose, in the Victorian style or the early 20th century style. He's taken it quite seriously. And he says, the poltergeist at Cooneen, or Cooneen as it's often spelt, near Brookborough, County Fermanagh, dates from 1913 to 1914. Father Hugh Benson had promised to come and investigate, but died in October 1914. It was at different times investigated by 3 priests, from whom I collected the following notes on which he bases his case study. In the Cooneen case, Bishop McKenna of Clocker, deciding it was diabolical, meaning
it was
the
devil.
devil,
Yes.
deputed, in his words, Dean Keown to exorcise it, but the Dean withdrew, leaving it to the bishop. As in the Derry Connolly case and so many others, bewildered and innocent girls touching puberty became unconscious mediums, enabling mischievous forms of spirit life to manifest themselves. So he's suggesting that this phenomena was down to the girls.
Which, of course, is one of those sort of ideas which took an awful lot of traction from the 1920s all the way through to the 70s and all the very famous poltergeist cases there, that it was somehow the girls' fault that these things were happening.
And isn't that just so typical, though, the blame the girls?
It is. Yeah, it's all their fault.
Some of the local stuff suggests that it was maybe happening before they moved in.
Well, that's the interesting thing, isn't it? In fact, from what we can gather, there was something happening before the Murphy family moved in.
Perhaps the girls did get affected by it.
Yes.
Perhaps it was maybe, exacerbated by having young women. But I don't think, I think Mr Leslie maybe hasn't got it.
So who was maybe even the old pensioner who died collecting the rent, or who was the idea of the person or the man who hanged himself in one of the rooms?
Shane Leslie says there's a rumour that an old pensioner had been murdered there on the day he drew his pension, so somebody came looking for his money. This may have opened the way for the poltergeist, but the only ghost described was very unlike an old pensioner, he says. A man had entered the house over early in the morning, and while waiting at the fire he saw this ghost, quote, come down like a ball of wool in a black bag. Strange description.
It's a very strange kind of but you can almost imagine exactly what he means, though.
Like a sort of
a mist,
grubby
a vapour,
sort of
emanating from a kind of dark shape which is coming down from the ceiling.
And he gives names. He goes into really great detail. He says the house had passed from the Burnsides to Corrigan's to Sherry's and then Murphy's. So we've got a sort of
you have got a lineage there of the occupancy. Interesting that the very first one seemed to be Burnside. And then it's Corrigan's, Sherry's and then Murphy's. Yeah. Now, are you reading into those names a little bit? Maybe I'm reading too much into those names.
But when you read into those names, are you thinking one's a Scots name and then it becomes more likely to be a Catholic name and that?
Yes.
Yeah. You can see that's a possibility.
It isn't, so that you can almost see that there is maybe some sort of a linear kind of progression.
And whenever you put that in context with what he then goes on to say, that the spirit showed a Protestant hostility to holy water, which seemed to infuriate it, for it played back the tune of boiling water. You've got to ask, were maybe this Burnside name or one of the previous occupants, they maybe have been Protestant and then...
Yes, now the thing is, when we were discussing this when we were actually visiting the Cooneen cottage, I think I sort of mentioned to you about the words of this song called the Isled Orange Flute.
Oh yeah.
And the original kind of words at all this to truncate the story of the song very, very briefly. It's where sort of a Protestant who plays this flute ends up having his flute taken away by the local priest, and in the words of the song, the old flute was took and its fate was pathetic. It was branded and burnt at the stake as heretic. As the flames lapped around it, there came a strange noise. Was the old flute still playing? The Protestant boys.
Wow.
And now I'm wondering...
It sounds like a trope, doesn't it? It sounds
does.
Like maybe the Protestants had left the area and maybe not under maybe.
And favourable circumstances. And it also seems to me, I wonder if this is like because this would have been a Victorian kind of like sort of song, from 1850s onwards. I'm just wondering whether actually the words that we've come to hear today are almost a parallel of the Cooneen ghost story. With the boiling water.
Mind.
It's in the mindset. As you said, is it a trope? Is it the kind of natural thing that
And that's
being
not
said?
something that had ever occurred to me.
Yeah.
Here, I'm going to sort of slot in a little snippet of the Boiling Water tune so you can imagine it. And it said that this tune was hammered out on the walls, rapped out on the walls, and presumably it was quite a well-known tune.
Well,
people would have recognised it.
It's
just from the rhythm of it.
Absolutely, and this is something that we've discussed a few times about the not the cultural appropriation of tunes, but the fantastic fact that tunes are used, and certainly in Ireland, by both sides of the community.
By both traditions.
In both traditions. Yeah. So the Boiling Water as a tune in itself and a melody can be used within nationalism as much as it can be used within unionism the further back you go.
That's right. And I actually printed off a list of various other names that this particular tune has been known by. O'Neill, who was the great collector of tunes,
Yes.
Actually, ironically, in 1913, lists Boiling Water as one of the splendid martial airs of Irish music. So perhaps it started, and it's gone back and forward between the traditions over the many, many years. But like I said, there's a long list of names. The Driving of the Calves, Finlay, the Foggy Jew.
The Foggy Jew.
Yeah,
yes.
maybe this is an early version of that tune. King William's March, Lass If I Come Near You, totally different spin on that tune
completely.
there. Song of the Volunteers, Such a Parcel of Rogues in a Nation, Playing Among the Rashes, The Praises of Limerick. So many different names for a tune that was amended and used.
Which then kind of suggests, Anne, that actually, the whole idea of it being actually the Boiling Water that was being rapped out.
Maybe spin.
It may not have been. It may have been the tune of the Boiling Water.
Yeah.
But if we're to
they
believe
recognised
this
it
idea,
as Boiling Water.
Yes.
Well, it's one of those great mysteries. Have a listen. And now that we've set the scene a little bit, we'll just take you back to County Fermanagh. I think we start recording in the car, so you'll hear a little bit of chat from us before we go in, and then we go in and explore. Have a listen. You'll certainly see it had an interesting effect on Gavin and I.
Well, Anne, shall we
take a move?
Let's make a move. I'm a bit nervous. I don't mind telling you.
You're not the only one, Gavin.
But best foot forward.
Well,
my first impression is that we are in the really wild, lonely place.
It really is.
Where the heights, looking down, there's forestry all around us. 3 old trees.
Yeah, so you can see where there's kind of a forestry plantation here, and some of it's well on. I mean, those trees there must be sort of 40 years old, 50 years old, and of course they've planted more now. But this house, as we look at it from the road, it was surrounded by trees for decades, and everyone forgot where it was, and then they cut down the trees. And then they rediscovered the house.
I'm going to say, I can tell you something from even as we were walking up the path. It just
looks like it's been bricked up, Gavin.
It does look like it's been bricked up. Part of the roof seems to have fallen in. It's got a tin roof, but it's an old Victorian cottage, farmhouse. As we're going up here, the main door looks as though it's been bricked up. I would imagine that's to stop people from going in.
Well, I don't know if they can. We don't know whether it's possible to access it or not, I suppose.
Well, do you know, we can
have a look around.
have a look around. And
I've
we'll
got to
tell
say,
you.
though, the situation where this house is, you know, it is such a lonely spot on top of this ridge surrounded by forest.
I mean, windswept, very much so. There's a modern fence which has been put up.
Look at those lovely flowers here. I mean, so we've just walked up this pathway towards the house.
Wow.
No, it's hard to see. There's a lintel there, the original stone lintel, rubble walls. Most of the windows have been bricked up.
I think you can see
the shape of it.
You can see the shape of it. I think you can see where the stone staircase might have been.
Where?
Around there, I think. Isn't that for the hay loft?
It does look like the recent sort of storms have taken a bit of a toll. Shall we poke around?
Let's poke around.
But honestly, even, I suppose, if you didn't know the story, you would still, like any old building, you know, it's forgotten, dilapidated.
I mean, you can still see a bit of the remnants of the plaster, the rendering work,
Oh my goodness.
and a bit of the iron.
So yeah, the chimney has completely collapsed in here.
Oh, has it? Let's have a
Yes,
look.
because I visited here some years ago now, and its decay has been swift. It's almost, I mean, it's a ruin now. So,
Oh, it is. As we come inside, yes.
my goodness, that has all collapsed since I saw it last.
Yeah, probably like I say, the latest storms haven't done it much
No,
use.
and I mean, things do, as you were saying earlier on, decay very, very quickly.
And once the roof comes off, then there's, you know, but it's amazing how much amazing how much of it survives. But as you said, I mean, there's an awful lot more to it when you were last here.
I mean, that's in a very short, that was a few years ago.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, let's take a look and sort of take stock. So we're standing inside, and we'll put a picture up with this episode so you'll be able to see the part that seems to have lost most of its roof now, although the main house has also lost a good bit of its roof. And I'm guessing this was the kind of outhouse.
This, I think, is the outhouse shed.
Part.
Yes, I think.
Or maybe a second bedroom. It could have been a morning room or sort of, you know, a good room.
Yes.
That's also possible. And then in the centre of the property is the front door, or where the front door used to be. And
then
the kitchen. And if memory serves me correctly, I mean, look, there's a lintel.
Yes, that is actually.
And folks, it's not safe.
It isn't,
you need to be
really.
very careful where you put your feet and so on. And it's not a place for children. Gosh.
It's not child friendly.
But I'm now walking into the kitchen area. And Gavin, to be honest, I don't think this will be here for much longer. I feel sick.
Yeah.
I feel sick.
Do you?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's probably just nerves though, isn't it? But look how that whole chimney has collapsed there in the middle. So this will be the kitchen area. And this is the area that, as far as I can recall, was was sort of their safe haven. They were able to stay in here and not listen to noise.
Yes, you can see part of the chimney has collapsed, and you can see part of the fireplace.
You can see the fireplace there. Oh, icky, creaky,
creaky.
no likey.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of it is obviously suggestion, but this was somebody's kitchen, and Mrs. Murphy cooked on the fire here, and she had her pots and pans hanging around on the walls.
I mean, for me coming in here and just seeing so much of the plasterwork is still around. You can imagine, 100 odd years ago, still being a very functional place. Looking at the timber, but the roof is all new. That's been put on.
Well, somebody tried
recently.
to shore it up, didn't they?
Yeah.
And Gavin, I'm going to let you go into this other room.
Do you know what? I was going to say, I don't really fancy going in there,
So,
but you know what? I am going to go into
beyond the
here.
kitchen, there is this other room.
Final room, which has hardly got much light
Which
in it.
I suspect was the bedroom where most of the activity
I
seems to have
suspect
been
it
recorded.
was.
And upstairs, there was an upstairs where a lot of the noise would have come from. So I think that the hayloft was just above where we are now. But
Yes, you can see where the door for the hayloft up there, and you can see the structure of the roof beam of the floor beams.
And
for
that's
the
a very
first
interesting
story.
beam there.
It is.
With the crooked. Oh
Yeah.
my goodness. I mean, there's no saving this property, and well, you probably could, but would you? Is the question.
Yeah.
And I think that what's really interesting is that there was a proposal there. You know, that proposal by someone to turn it into a coffee shop, and the council were told not to. Gavin, what are your thoughts on this place? Do you have any vibes from it?
I'm not sure whether it's the power of suggestion or not. I don't like it. Don't really like it.
I feel quite...
Actually, I do feel as though I just want to get out. I have this horrible... I don't usually feel that about places, about wanting to suddenly, I just need to go.
Partly the dilapidation is so sad as well.
I mean, that's also from a very kind of like sort of human perspective.
Folks, Gavin is actually heading for the exit right now.
I literally am. I couldn't... She's never seen me move this quick.
Oh, don't like it.
It is... They're definitely not welcoming.
I don't know what to say. I feel as though...
Actually, I just had a massive shiver down my spine.
No, but I've just spotted something.
Did you?
It's well worth calling out. And I think I mentioned it to you that the only time I've been here before, I could see the arms
yes, you
from
did. You
above
mentioned
the
that,
fire.
yes.
And it's now here to see. So people did their cooking on that for Mrs Murphy and fed her family of that. Sorry if I sound a bit out of breath. I'm actually feeling quite sick.
And I'm out of breath because I've had to go and clamber in through there. I'm just naturally out of breath.
Will we take a walk around the back just to sort of make sure that we've seen it all properly?
Yes, I think so. Let's have a quick look around.
I think maybe I feel sad more than anything, and I think that's how I felt the last time as well. Are you spooked, Gav?
I wouldn't say I'm spooked.
Oh, okay, heaven forbid.
No, I wouldn't say I'm spooked. I would say I'm maybe slightly, I don't know, slightly unnerved.
No, it's definitely unnerving. And yeah, it's a pleasant building. If it was, in its heyday, you would have thought, this is a home, could have been a cosy home.
On a bright sunny day, if you're on somewhere like here, it would be beautiful. It would be beautiful. Stunning. But there's a hint of darkness about it. And that I do find...
It's very interesting because this is a great site for a house, isn't it?
It is. It's fantastic.
Here it is, ruined. And if this was in, most places you would find somebody would have snapped it up, bulldozed it, put a great big, 6-bedroom mansion on it.
Yeah, I mean, we've got beautiful, beautiful views from up here as well.
Honestly, I don't know, maybe it is the power of suggestion, but I feel like crying, honestly. And I think most of all, I feel like are you cold?
I've suddenly got quite
chills.
Cold. Yeah, suddenly got. Oh, yeah.
Well, the wind there is a bit of breeze. What makes me saddest is the pathos of the story. This woman lost her husband, the breadwinner, and she had to move into. And then this happened.
Yeah.
Are those things?
Are they connected? Are they related? But either way, she had a terrible kind of like some misfortune. And then, of course, going to America.
I'm not even sure how the story ended, to be honest. Yeah. They left for America, and then somebody ended up in an institution.
And that's not really a very happy ending. I mean, so...
It's horrendous. So what we don't really know is the full story. But we'll go back. We'll go back to the car, Gavin. And say goodbye to the Cooneen House.
We will say goodbye to the Cooneen House.
And folks, if you do decide to take a trip, it is beautiful landscape here and very much an atmospheric place, isn't it?
It is. And of course, take care as you come around here and treat it with respect.
It's definitely not a safe building.
No.
So, yeah, whether you should be going inside it or not, use your judgment, but I don't recommend it, actually.
No.
I think what what I'm getting from this visit today is that it's time to close the chapter on the Cooneen House.
I fully agree. I think, to be quite honest, yes, it's an important place to come and see and to
it's an important story.
It's a story to tell, but I think really this is it won't be here for much longer, I don't think.
Anyway, so we just hope maybe anything that's left behind here can rest in peace, and those people find peace wherever they went. Gosh, this isn't a very uplifting episode.
Do you know, I was going to say, this hasn't...
I think we should go to the pub, Gav.
Yeah, we should.
Yeah. Right, so I've just made Gavin turn his microphone back on.
Yes, indeed. Yes.
We're walking away from the house now, having just had a wee look and a wee chat.
Yeah. I wasn't really expecting that.
Yeah, and I want to know really what you said that. And I said, wait, I was switching this back on.
Switch the mic back on.
Why?
Well, I
was
expecting to go into an old abandoned ruined farmhouse.
Right.
And
we did.
And observe the features inside, which we did. But I wasn't expecting to go in and suddenly feel like I was being told to get out.
You felt like you were being told to get out?
I'm being told to get out.
Oh, that's really interesting, because that's not what I get. I didn't really feel that I was being told to get out. I didn't feel comfortable.
But not in an angry sort of way.
Right.
It was just more sort of like when being like sort of felt you shouldn't really be here.
And is that because there's the place is falling down and it doesn't belong to us?
It might simply be my rule breaking.
Yeah, like, exactly, because you're not breaking rules, Gavin.
Yes, it's sort of like well, we can't do that. I'd like to. My sensible side of my brain says yes, that's what it is. But the further I'm away,
excuse me,
you're still feeling a bit disturbed.
Yeah. Physically, like
physically, yes, you do. Yeah, physically, yes.
Yeah.
Because
I'm not putting this on for the benefit of everyone. I really genuinely don't get a bit
Jenny has lost a lot of colour in her face. And it's like,
oh, God.
and needs a moment. I am, of course, getting more jolly the
further
away we get.
Fascinating.
And I'll tell you this. Isn't that interesting? Because I didn't feel like cracking a joke or anything like that when I was up there.
Yeah, I've got my twitchy thing where I just kind of, my legs nearly get taken away from underneath me. I don't know if it's because I need to run away.
Flight or fight.
I don't know. It's weird. Those people who know me well know what I mean.
Yeah.
But I know this is really weird. This is a really weird episode, Gavin.
Oh, I'm going to say, but
if you ever hear this, if we ever put this out,
this is going to be a very odd thing that we've ever done.
Career ending.
And goodness knows I've had enough moments of those.
And what career is what I was going to say?
Careers, many careers.
It's such a strange house. Why is that still standing in this beautiful location with that lovely little path going up to it? And you've got this ruin that inside is so sad and dark. Isn't it?
I'll tell you.
And not just dark physically, like dark.
No, the weird thing is, we're standing here looking at it. I have stopped shivering.
Oh, yeah, you have.
That is, all right, you could, I'm trying to say, well, yeah, you're more exposed up there than down by here. Yeah. But no, it's a nice,
lovely
pleasant day.
Yeah,
nice, pleasant afternoon. And as I say, I didn't expect to get such an immediate kind of like sort of mental reaction. That's quite odd.
Mental reaction.
Mental reaction. I've got no mental. No, you go in and you think, no, I just feel that I'm being told, and then mentally I'm being told I shouldn't be here. I need to go. There's something. For your own safety, you need to go.
Well, in fairness, it's not a safe house.
It's not a safe house. So it could simply be like your rational brain saying, you could trip on something, you could hurt something. But no, I usually have a kind of like sort of idea of when I'm doing something dangerous, and then the danger side of my head kicks in and say, "Oh, this is dangerous. Get out. This is something different."
Yes, it wasn't logical.
It wasn't a logical danger. It's but of course it could all be suggestion because the story of the background story. And we also have to remember that we're not here at night.
Oh, can you imagine?
Could I?
People go in there for the crack, and they start to I suppose that's what we did. But then they start to do calling out and stuff like this. What the heck?
No,
nuts.
No, they're really.
I wouldn't be doing that.
No, and I have to admit, in this occasion, and most occasions, I would say leave it well alone.
I know, as I said to you just earlier on, I think I'm a great one for preserving history and heritage, but bulldozer and big fire is what's needed there.
Maybe this is a bit like Borley Rectory for anybody who's been
Oh, well,
knows about that.
Well, how did that end up going up in flames?
Exactly.
That was a bit of a go and look into Borley Rectory.
Borley Rectory,
it burnt to the ground, didn't it?
It did. Harry Price and Borley
But he
Rectory.
wanted to buy it and study it long term.
Yes.
And I mean, as a long term study, fascinating. Somebody with loads of money and you want to buy the Cooneen house and do some experiments. It's not a bad idea. As I look up at it and I see the chimney, I'm imagining smoke coming out of the chimney and it as a home.
Yes, no, I can imagine. Yes, because where we're actually standing, the path goes straight up. You see the front door, you see the chimney, and you can imagine. It's very easy to imagine smoke rising from the chimney, which of course now we know we go in there.
And children out working and maybe keeping vegetables or whatever. I mean, I know that's my logical imagination telling me a story about the house, and I know the story of the house and all of that.
Well, do you know what, Anne? Let's leave it with that kind of nice, happy image.
Yeah.
And say goodbye to Cooneen.
Okay, we're back in the car.
Well, yes. Well, it sounds a bit like sort of overdramatic to say that. I think we both had a bit of an incident.
Bit of a crisis.
Bit of a crisis. I'm going to say for...
You're not normally lost for words, and neither am I, Gavin.
I'm going to say, well, one thing that neither of us can be accused of.
Yeah, that's the word.
But... Do you know, something you were saying just there now about, is it the house? Is it the land? Is it the story? And there's so many things, I think, that are part and package about
I think
Cooneen.
For me, often, if you have a basement where people don't go, that tends to feel spooky. Or if you have, a house that nobody's lived in for a while, it can feel spooky because it's empty, because it hasn't had the energy of people in it being kind of painting it, looking after it. Look at that wind.
That wind.
Gosh, it could be so spooky, that house on a dark night.
Oh, on a dark, wild night. Or you feel like when the wind is getting up.
But the house itself is like a ghost now. The house itself is a time capsule that hasn't been lived in or loved for 100 years.
Yeah. In fact, that really is it. If ever there's a story about a haunted house... you'd think, Cooneen is actually it. And yet, it's all about the story of the Murphys, the people who lived here, the echoes of the people who lived here. And
to be honest, do we, it could be suggestion, right? We read, we know the story and all of that. But do you think that people can pick up on energy? And obviously, there's really documented scary stuff. Whether they imagined it, everybody hallucinated, all those people witnessing it all hallucinated the same thing, which is, I think, highly doubtful. But assuming they did, they were still frightened, they still left. So that fear, do you think we can feel that even 100 years later?
I mean, to be quite honest, Anne, I kind of think that even if there was no kind of such a thing as the poltergeist activity there, and they all imagined it, as you say, they were frightened. And I think that the fear of a place sometimes leaves its imprint. And not in a kind of spooky woo kind of way, maybe, but more in a kind of like, so it can end up being tangible. There are certain sites in the world where you go, where you feel the sadness, it's tangible.
And the other thing that's happened that we haven't even talked about is that house has been used by people with dark intentions. They've done, ceremonies in there, presumably. That's why there's a pentagram on the wall. We didn't even talk about that. So is that what we're? It is maybe we experiencing.
Maybe we're experiencing a lot of dark energy from people who are continuing to do silly things there, and to abuse the site, really, because it is a site of.
Or I suppose if depending on your intentions, maybe they see the site as a portal, as a place where the supernatural was present.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they think that there's some kind of Loki to accelerate what they want to do, but I just feel that if the stories about the poltergeist activity are true and accurate, then that adds a whole layer onto everything. But even if it's not, we're talking about family and friends of these, the Murphys who are around here, and the farmers and local farmers and local.
And that's for me a huge tragedy. In this instance, their community turned against them. They started out trying to support them, and then they turned against them and accused them of things which were, they were ostracised to a large degree. At least that's how I interpret it.
I interpret exactly the way as well. And the thing is, if you think that happened, right?
Sorry, that was messed up.
Because you're not well.
Not right.
Not right. Not right. If you think that's how people were thinking about this 100 odd years ago, can you imagine how they treated people 200, 300, 400 years ago when these kind of things happened?
No. Horrendous.
So
anyway, we're back in the car. We're going to head back. Back to the safety of County Down from the wilds. Oh, the wilds!
Literally the wilds of the Wild West.
So it's interesting. We were a bit lost for words there, I think, at times, weren't we?
We were, and obviously since we've been to the location. I've had a lot of thought about it. You've had a lot of thought about it, and now my kind of sort of cynical side is kicked in.
Okay.
Again. Yeah, cynical side is kicked in. I think, well, maybe because I kind of felt, that I was a bit sort of, on edge. Was I on edge?
You were on edge.
I was on edge.
Bad underfoot.
Yeah.
It was...
and I kind of think, was it the power of suggestion? And then listening back to it, I don't know. I was fairly still quite cynical, but there were certainly things going on there that I wasn't happy with. But maybe it's maybe it was the whole atmosphere of the place, maybe it was the power of suggestion. But
what does it even mean? The atmosphere of the place. What does that mean?
What does that mean? Does that mean that there's some kind of imprint on the place? And goodness knows I've been to battlefields where there's an imprint on a place, or on points on historical locations and sites where you can feel kind of almost a visceral reaction to something that's happened there.
Well, it sounds like before the Per Murphy family moved in, there was a vibe about the place because people didn't stay.
Didn't like it.
And I would argue that we actually experienced something of that without really... You didn't have you didn't really expect to feel the way you felt.
I certainly didn't. And all I wanted to do was get out of the place.
Yeah, Gavin, you were a bit of a wimp, to be honest. You were running out of the place, honestly.
I was going to say, I was out like a hare. And which I wouldn't say surprised me, but I'm surprised I had quite such I just didn't want to be there. Didn't want to be there at all. And what really surprises me is the reaction that I think both of us had when we were on the path going back, saying we wouldn't have minded if the place had been destroyed. That actually is something which goes contrary to every fibre of my being. I even said that
at the time. This is I'm a big fan of protecting heritage and saving heritage, but bulldoze it and burn it with fire was my feeling.
Yes.
And then I felt like I started to think about that over the last few days, and that's not what I think.
No,
funnily enough.
No, it isn't. And this is something that I don't feel that. I mean, I'm not sure. But
standing there, we both felt it.
We both felt that. If it was completely level to the ground, it would be a service to people. But why did we feel that?
Well, I think that was maybe a sort of animalistic kind of experience. Whereas when you put on your sort of thinking brain, you say to yourself, what I said to myself is, that's cultural heritage.
Yeah.
That building is actually an incredibly famous ghost story, very well documented, witnessed by perhaps tens, perhaps even more than tens of maybe even 100 people. And then the word of it spread far and wide. That really small, derelict, unassuming building is the centre of a really interesting story.
It is. And of course now I feel and felt pretty much almost like on the way we were driving back to County Down. I was kind of feeling, really that the place should be preserved and conserved, but protected. Mm-hmm. Protected from a whole lot of things.
And it's not protected at the moment. It's not protected either physically.
No.
It's not protected in legislation any more than any other building is.
No.
So really the owners, whoever they are, whether it's the Forestry Service, whoever it is, could bulldoze it tomorrow. And
nobody would there'd be no legal recourse or anything like that, because as you say, it's not protected. It is just basically a pile of stones on the top of a heath. But
it's very interesting, that young man that we discussed, there was a story in one of the newspapers about how somebody wanted to open a coffee shop in the location, and I think the local council were on board. I'll have to find that story again. But that was stopped allegedly by the local church, who said absolutely on no account are you to bring people here. It's not the sort of place where people should be coming.
Yeah, do you think that's actually maybe like having a coffee shop, turning it into a coffee shop is maybe like a bridge too far kind of thing? Or
does it Disneyfy something?
Does it Disneyfy something which is actually maybe something which is because clearly very traumatic for the Murphy family to such an extent that is. I mean, I see it really as a place of tragedy.
It is. It's a sad place. That was my overwhelming feeling. It was of sadness, and it still is. I remember that was my overwhelming feeling the first time, and it's still. But it's hard to explain the feeling that I have when I think of the Cooneen house. It's not.
I mean, you had a very physical reaction, of course.
Yes, and that wasn't because I was frightened.
I had a physical reaction. I was frightened.
Were you?
No, well, I was very uneasy.
I don't think I was frightened. I'm very respectful and careful. Like I would now, you notice, listeners, that we didn't go in and start asking ghosts to buy stuff.
No. That wouldn't have been our.
I wouldn't want to do that, and I'm not sure it's the kind of thing people should do anyway. I don't know. Maybe you're grown ups. You can decide for yourself, but. So it wasn't that made me feel unwell. I just felt that, like you were saying, the atmosphere was really affected me, and it still does even when I think about it. And maybe it's that sadness. In terms of turning it into a coffee shop, I personally don't think that that's appropriate for it, but I also don't think that knocking it down is appropriate either.
Or maybe even just letting nature take its course and.
Over time.
I mean, already the roof is gone, and we've seen how the chimney has fallen into the kitchen.
I know.
You would think that a few winters more, and there may not.
Honestly, if it was up to me, I think I would probably put the roof back on it. I think I would maybe put the iron arm over the fire again and give it a feeling of a house, and maybe let people visit it like they would maybe visit, say, the Bronte Schoolhouse here, which is a similarly aged building. So I would maybe be inclined to stop the rot, but I don't know. It's not my property. But the question is it a heritage site?
I mean, I would undoubtedly say yes, because of course, but then I would probably say that everything's a heritage site.
I know, well, we're guilty of that. But this has such an amazing story.
It does, and as I say, it's documented, and it has been documented as a feature in Cooneen. As a historic event. A historic event happened at this house. Now, whether it was paranormal is almost immaterial, because a hugely important
Well, it was a cultural event. It was a human event. It was a spiritual event.
Which has had its ripples going all the way down, as we've seen, from right through to 1988 and right through to 2015, and right through even 2024.
No, so maybe there is an argument here that is heritage that is in danger, and maybe should be scheduled or something for its own protection.
Something done with it, yes.
And that's, I guess, the reason that we decided to bring you this bonus episode.
Exactly.
Should we be protecting the Cooneen Ghost House? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for taking the trip with me, Gavin. That was brave.
Yes, as ever, thank you for showing me this wonderful site.
It's an interesting spot, and it raises some interesting questions. The Homespun History podcast is available now to download, not only from Spotify, but also now from Apple Podcasts, I'm delighted to say. And if I keep my fingers crossed, I might also be able to download it off Google Podcasts in the near future. That's part of our plan. If you enjoyed listening today, please like and subscribe and share our podcast.
And tell all your friends.
We do this for fun, but it's also great to have your involvement.
It is.
And it's great to hear from our listeners, and had some lovely feedback on last week's episode, Gavin, on the Boa Island podcast that we did. So that's always lovely to get.
It's fantastic.
So yeah, tune in next time, and thank you for listening. Thanks, Gavin.
Thank you very much, Anne. See you next time.
If you enjoyed the Homespun History podcast, don't forget to subscribe to receive alerts as new episodes become available. And you can follow Homespun History on Twitter @Homespun History. Thanks for listening.